everybody, and welcome to the Age UK Lancashire podcast. This is the second in our dementia series, and today we're just going to look at the word dementia and answer some common questions about it. So what does it look like? What does it mean? Where does the term come from? How do you know if you've got dementia? And today, to help us look at this, I'm really happy to introduce Amanda Boult, who works for the Alzheimer's Society as Local Services Manager for the Pennine area. Amanda, welcome, and thanks very, very much for being part of our podcast today. Can I start by asking you to tell us a little bit about yourself and your role?
Hi, Lynn. Oh, thank you ever so much. It's a pleasure to take part in this series. I suppose I'll start off with my link to dementia. Started really over 18 years ago when my mum was diagnosed with young onset dementia at the age of 62. And I suppose, like many people and families, we were just thrown into it. You know, we didn't understand what dementia was. We weren't really sure how it was affecting mum. We set off on a very steep learning curve. And I remember a particularly difficult day, and I didn't know what to do. And there was very little support, you know, back then. I'm going back 18 years ago, very little support. And I just found a telephone number for a local Alzheimer's Society office, and I rang it, and I was in quite an emotional, stressed state. And there was a lovely lady who was just very calm, and she gave me the advice I needed, and she directed us to social services, which at that point is what we needed. And so that was 18 years ago. And then, so fast forward a few years further down the line, and once mum was ended up needing to be professionally cared for, I started thinking I'd like to share, you know, the experience we've gone through, the knowledge I've gained over those years. How can I do that? So I volunteered for the Alzheimer's Society initially. And then following that, trained and got a role as a dementia advisor for them.
Perfect.
And that's really my background and how I came into working within this environment, if you like. Just that real personal want to share and to help other families. Really, because it's, as you know, it's such a difficult thing to really comprehend and to help support.
And you don't know really until you've been through it, do you?
No, you don't.
No.
So then, so moving forward now, I think I did a frontline role as dementia advisor over in West Lancashire for about 7 years. It was an absolute privilege because I met so many people who'd just been diagnosed with dementia. I supported them and the families, which is what our dementia advisors do. You know, giving them strategies to cope, helping them understand the different types of dementia and the symptoms. And so I did that for 7 years, and now, as I say, complete privilege to go on that journey with all those lovely families and to help support them. And then now I've moved, and now I manage a team of dementia advisors over in Pennine, Lancashire, who offer the same service.
Perfect. Thanks very, very much. Thanks for sharing your personal story as well. Can we start our talk today now by looking at the term dementia? And I know that people find it difficult to know what's the difference between dementia and Alzheimer's disease. So could you tell us what dementia is, please? Is it a disease?
So we say dementia is an umbrella term. And that term is used to describe the symptoms that occur when the brain and its cells are affected or damaged by specific diseases and conditions. So if you think of the term cancer, and then you understand from that, there's very different types of cancer. So it might be skin cancer, lung cancer, etc. And they would all have very different symptoms and very different courses of action and treatments. So dementia, I liken it to that kind of term.
Yes.
And then you've got, so Alzheimer's disease, for instance, is the most common form of dementia.
Right.
And then you've got over 100 different types of conditions that are dementia. So it does affect a person's ability to function in their day-to-day lives. And again, it's very dependent on the type of dementia. So the Alzheimer's disease is the most common, followed by like vascular dementia, and then lots of other different types of dementia.
Right. So so dementia is the umbrella term, and there are lots of types of dementia.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So and every type of dementia will be a little bit different, won't it, Amanda? Are there any sort of common symptoms that might be present?
Yeah, so I think the common type, so everybody always thinks about memory loss, don't they?
Yes.
To start with, everybody thinks, mum's, forgotten a conversation I've told her yesterday, or, forgotten that we've been out, that kind of thing. Everybody looks to memory loss as to be that main symptom. But there's lots of other different symptoms, like there's confusion. Somebody may get confused, say the times of day, they might get them muddled up, think it's later on in the day when it's only morning. Some people can have personality changes and changes in their behaviour. So somebody who might have been a very shy person might become quite outgoing or outspoken.
Yes.
Their language might change. They may use language that would shock you and think, oh, that's not how my mum would normally react or say something. People can forget names and faces or environments. You might not recognise an environment they're in. So say you might walk to your local town and say, in my local town, there's a clock tower in the middle of the town.
Right,
which most people would use as a focal point. But sometimes somebody might go there and just all of a sudden not recognise that.
Yes.
And so then would become a bit, wary of their surroundings because they're not recognising a common place that they would know. Some people might become quite repetitive in the conversation, asking the same questions over and over again. And that can be quite very hard work, I would say, for family members who are on the other end of that constant same question that's recurring.
Yes, quite tiring, isn't it?
It is. It's very tiring and upsetting as well because, I suppose your relationships are changing as well.
Yes.
Within that. And as I say, so behaviours can change as well. Somebody might, start behaving in a different way, which can be very concerning and upsetting for families as well.
Yes.
So there's lots of different symptoms, but not... So the different types of dementia, symptoms can vary.
Yes.
So say another type of dementia is vascular dementia. And people with vascular dementia, they can have very good days and very bad days with their memory. So it's not a consistent level.
Right.
And also with vascular dementia, people can become a little bit depressed as well.
Yes.
Which can make the symptoms worse.
Yes.
And then another type of dementia, frontotemporal dementia, which affects the frontal lobes of the brain. That can affect, so a person with frontotemporal may not have as much obvious memory loss.
Right.
But they would have the changes in behaviours.
Yes.
So that might become more apparent. And I think in some younger people where that's a bit more prevalent, it may be the first changes family would notice is that change in behaviour, so they wouldn't necessarily think it's a dementia because they're thinking memory loss.
Yes.
So they would just think, Dad started acting really strangely.
Yes.
They might not equate that with, could this be a dementia?
Yes. And with
they might just think he's being awkward or...
And a younger person... as well. It's difficult, isn't it, with younger people to think it might be dementia.
Exactly, and that's why it can be really hard for a younger person to get a diagnosis. It can take a lot longer.
Yes.
Because they tend to go through a route through, say, neurology rather than a memory assessment service. So they would rule everything else out before they would think about dementia.
Yes.
So it can be quite frustrating for younger people because it takes a long time usually to get any definitive diagnosis that explains why their behaviours are changing.
Yes. So no two people then will, even though there's similarities, no two people will experience exactly the same. And would it, a person's personality and background might also have an effect on how the dementia is? Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. So we always say here at Alzheimer Society that when you've met one person with dementia, you've met one person.
Yes.
Because no two people will be affected in the same way, even if you've got two people with Alzheimer's disease, which you would think would
would be the same
path. They wouldn't. They absolutely would not follow the same path. So it's very, very individualised.
Yes.
And also dementia, it kind of, it doesn't discriminate again. So I've worked with, doctors who had dementia.
Yes, yeah.
Housewives who've developed dementia. There's no norm as to why some people would develop it and others wouldn't.
Yes.
It doesn't seem to matter about their background, their intellectual level or anything like that. It just seems to be, it doesn't discriminate.
No.
It's really sad, because people always want that answer, like, why me?
Yes, yeah.
Why, I've lived a healthy life, I've done this, that and the other. Why have I developed dementia?
Yeah.
And sadly, we can't answer that question.
No.
We know it's plaques in the brain, that causes the issues, but we've not yet got to the point to see why those plaques develop in some people and not others.
Yes, yeah. So we've established so far that dementia is an umbrella term. There are many types of dementia, and there are some common symptoms, but no two people with dementia will experience exactly the same. And personality, background, and other health conditions can all make a difference to how that person experiences dementia. So I suppose that's a very general overview, and later in our series we might look at different types in a lot more detail. But just for today, we want to answer some questions that are asked commonly about dementia. So could I start with this one, please? Does dementia only occur in older people, say over the age of 65, 70?
Oh, no, absolutely not. Unfortunately, we have some people who are in their 40s who have developed dementia.
Right.
So it's not a natural part of aging, which I think is something that a lot of people think.
Yes.
That everybody would know. Not every older person will develop dementia.
Right.
And not everybody who has dementia is older. So we have a lot of younger people who are diagnosed with dementia, sadly.
Yes.
So
if my mum has dementia, Amanda, does that mean I'll get it?
No, not at all. There is a very, very tiny proportion and group of people where dementia is familial, which means it runs in the family.
Right.
And there is one gene that has been found. The APO4 gene, which people can be tested for, but I am talking a tiny, 2% of families, and that tends to be where you'll have a family where, say, mum may have it, two aunties or two mum sisters would have had it, maybe the brother. It's very apparent.
Yes.
But for the general population, say for you and I, whose mums have had dementia, it doesn't follow that we would then
definitely get
dementia.
it. Yes.
And even if people, those familial ones, even if they have that gene, it still doesn't guarantee that they will develop it.
Right.
It can just be that they have that faulty, but it doesn't mean that they will then go on to develop it.
Right. Yes. And what about a cure for dementia?
No, not at the moment. There isn't a cure. There are medications that can help with the symptoms.
Yes, yeah.
So we say if people can get on one of those medications early enough, it may keep them a bit more stable as to where they're at now for a little bit longer. It won't stop it developing, but it will give them a bit of clarity now.
Yes.
And hopefully help them put some plans in place for the future.
Yes, yeah.
There has been, so obviously funding into research has been really pitiful over the previous years, but now that is improving.
Yes.
And there was
So, when should a person be concerned? So, for instance, I often forget things. I forget where I've parked my car, what I went into a room for, or I might get distracted and I do silly things like put the teapot lid on the milk bottle, and I've even gone into shops where I've no idea what I need, and then when I get home I remember. So does that mean I should be worried?
Oh, well, you've hit the nail on the head there, really, when you say you get distracted or you remember later on what you went shopping for. Everybody does that. You know, how many times have you run upstairs to get something and then got to the top of the stairs and forgot what you've gone for? I do it all the time. Now, the difference between that being a normal day-to-day occurrence and that becoming an issue is normally I would retrace my steps. So when I go back downstairs and go back to what I was doing prior, it would pop up in my head, oh, I went upstairs to, to get a towel. So you retrace your steps and you know then what you were doing. Now, somebody with dementia wouldn't really be able to retrace the steps, or they'd retrace the steps but perhaps go and do something else not go back to the original activity. So we call it like a little gap in your memory.
Right.
So when that kind of chain of thought is broken because of the dementia, then you're not going to remember what you'd gone for.
Right.
So that's when I would be kind of concerned.
Yes.
And that's when I would start saying, oh, okay, perhaps that needs looking at. So same thing with about, if you lose your keys. I wouldn't be worried about you losing your keys. I'd be more worried if you didn't know what your keys were for.
I see.
Some people might pick a phone up and just not know how to dial the buttons.
Yes.
But they know what so it's those kinds of things rather than it just being forgetting where we put something or, not knowing why we've gone into a room. It's actually more about how do those things work. If I don't actually understand what those things are, that's when I start to become more concerned. Okay.
And I've heard the term cognitive impairment and cognition that are talked about. Just for clarity, what is cognition and what is cognitive impairment?
So cognition is the term that refers to the mental processes involved in our everyday lives. So gaining knowledge and comprehension, why we do things, that kind of thing, the steps we take to do something. And that's all part of our mental processes.
Yes.
So it's basically your ability to think, remember, problem solve, that kind of thing.
Right.
So when that becomes impaired, so for example, somebody might not be able to find the right word for things, or might not be able to get dressed in the right sequence and might put clothes on in the wrong order.
Yeah.
That's when perhaps there's some kind of change in the cognition.
I see.
And so I would say the same symptoms, there can be very similar symptoms to dementia, but having a cognitive impairment doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to then go on to develop dementia. There's something called mild cognitive impairment that some people will go to the GP with issues and they might get diagnosed with a mild cognitive impairment.
Yes.
And that's something that, we can help support people with, but we do stress to people, it doesn't mean you're going to go on to develop dementia. It just means you might need a few strategies and hints and tips how to live with that cognitive impairment.
Yeah. And what might cause that cognitive impairment?
So it could be, that there's lots of things that could cause it. So it could be nutritional deficiencies, depression, stress, hormone changes. So like for females, we go through the menopause, and we lack certain hormones, which actually, you can, there is a way of increasing those. Could even be lack of sleep.
Yes.
Or you might, generally, our lives are so stressful nowadays. There's so much going on in them that, the brain has to filter things. It can't save absolutely everything.
No, that's true.
So it has to filter some things out.
Yes.
Just to process and just to keep us like alive and working.
Yes.
So that, sometimes we don't store everything. I don't store everything.
No.
And those less important things we don't store aren't really massively important. So it doesn't matter. We can cope day to day without those things.
Yeah.
It just becomes more of an issue once it's there, affecting your day-to-day life, like every single day, like your ability to cook a meal or make a cup of tea or get dressed. That's when you'd be concerned.
Yeah. So if I was forgetting things every day, losing my car every day, and forgetting names of everyday objects, and I'm really worried, what do I do? What do I do, and where do I start?
Right, the absolute first place to start is to book an appointment with your doctor, with your GP, and to go along and discuss it with them.
Right.
I always say to people it's a really good idea to write things down.
Yes.
Because, you get into that clinical room and you think, oh, well, I'm having problems with this, and this, and then you can't actually think of the examples.
Yeah.
So I always say write it down. There's a really good symptoms checklist on the Alzheimer Society website.
Okay.
That people can download, and it has a list of all the symptoms, and it has space for you to write down any kind of examples or any,
Yeah, oh, that's useful, yeah.
Yeah, it's really good. And it's not just for a person who might be having those problems. It could be for a family member who's noticing a person might be having those problems. I just want to make a little list and just so you can review it and look over it. So you could take that with you, or your own little notes, it's fine. And the doctor will obviously ask you more questions, find out a little bit about you, look at your overall health as well.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that going and highlighting that means you're going to come out with a diagnosis. Not at all. They would look at your whole self, all of your medical conditions, your history.
Yeah.
They would probably do blood tests, ask you more questions, and then following on from that, if they did think there was a real problem, then you get referred to a memory assessment clinic.
Right.
But a lot of people, there may be other things that are causing those issues, like we spoke about earlier.
Yes.
Thyroid problems, hormone problems, deficiencies, or other medications you're on. Some other medications can make you forgetful. So they might look at tweaking your medications. So, yeah. Oh, wait, I would say you're better to be safe than sorry, and you're better to get checked out. Though I know it's quite a daunting thing, isn't it, to actually go and say, I'm struggling with this. Yeah.
It can be, can't it? Yeah. And Amanda, thanks so much. It's been really great to talk to you and hear about your story as well. If you had one word of advice for a family living with dementia, what do you think that might be?
Well, going off my own personal experience, I would absolutely say you've got to live in the moment. You've got to enjoy each and every day and moment. Because, speaking from experience, I found worrying about what might be coming next was absolutely fruitless.
Yes, yeah.
Because there was always one point in the day with Mum that that was joyful and that I could enjoy and smile about. And I think all those times I stressed and worried about what the future may hold,
yes,
what things may happen, they didn't happen, And
yes.
I should have just loved the moment.
Yes, that's very good advice. I think that's wonderful advice.
I've got a lovely little quote.
Go on.
If you don't mind me finishing on.
No, I'd like.
It's from the book Still Alice.
Yes.
And it says, "My yesterdays are disappearing, and my tomorrows are uncertain. So what do I live for? I live for each day, and I live in the moment." And I think that sums it up perfectly for me.
I think it does. I really do like that. Yeah. Thank you so much, Amanda. And thanks to everyone who's listening. I really, really appreciate you taking the time, all of you, to join us. And you'll find details about our next podcast on the Age UK Lancashire website. Take care of each other and stay strong. Much love, Lynn.